Today we'll be looking at securing sustainable commodities through blockchain for transparency. Before we start off, I have a question for you. If any of you guys knows what the number 23.5 relates to, if you want, you can scan the QR code. There's going to be an online page popping up, and you can put in your answer, and we'll be revealing this in a few minutes. But so basically, what I want to talk about today is essentially three things. So supply chain and how it, and the complexities associated to the current offline setup of commodity trading, and then we look at blockchain and basically how we can streamline supply chain operations, and finally BLK, so the company that I represent, and its role in digitalizing the trading of commodities. And just like my colleagues just before me has said, that in general trade tends to be fairly frictional and very much offline because of the sheer number of counterparts and stakeholders that are part of the chain, and not all of them, let's say, add any value. So there's usually a couple of brokers each side, buy side, sell side. Obviously there is value added, which is shipping, which is packaging, which could be liquidity provision for the suppliers and the buyers, but in general there is a lot of stakeholders in the chain that don't really add much value, and they only contribute to the final inflation of the price. And so this is an example here from one of the real suppliers on our platform, which is a cashew nut farmer across in Africa, and they sell cashew nuts at 50 pence per kilo. By the time these hit the wholesale shelves in Europe, they're over $15 per kilo, 15 pounds per kilo. And nothing has fundamentally changed. A cashew nut is still a cashew nut. The only value that has been added within the chain is usually shipping and packaging. Shipping only really accounts for 5% usually of the value of the commodity at its source, and so that shows us how many intermediaries there are that really add up to the final price. And in general, the material supply chain tends to be very much offline and inefficient, with generally too many intermediaries. So what is the solution to this, to streamline this process? It's essentially to cut out the intermediaries. This is what we do through BLK, and we'll look at that a bit more in detail later on. But generally speaking, streamlining the process so that only the stakeholders that do add value within the chain are kept within the chain, and you bring down the cost basically on both ends, increasing profitability on one side and reducing costs for the final consumers, for the society in general. And so the solution for this is what we brought to the market back in 2019, is our raw materials marketplace. Our commodity marketplace is essentially a spot market, an Amazon, imagine, for raw materials and commodities. So it's a peer-to-peer marketplace connecting buyers, sellers and shippers of raw materials, and providing a transparent market for them to trade on. Now let me bore you guys with a few stats. 99% of the businesses in Italy, where I'm from, but in the UK as well, they're small businesses. So they're absolutely the sheer backbone of the economy is made up of small businesses. And in fact, if we look at the UK in particular, 75% of the businesses are one-man shows, so companies with one person alone. So it's really the big chunk of our economy is hinging upon small businesses and essentially people. There were 2.7 billion people active online, to buy online, and so it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So the commodity trading is slowly going online. And so what we can do really here is securing the journey through blockchain. So let's have a quick look at an example here with an iron ore. Iron ore is mined in Guinea, for example, or in India, and then it's taken over to the port, it's loaded on board a ship, and then the ship sails on an export of coal, it's discharged into the port warehouse, and finally delivered to the final or semi-final let's say receiver, who could be, for example, a manufacturing business or a steel mill and so on. So now, if we introduce blockchain within the whole flow, the whole process, we're able to see with a click at any point in time what is, for example, the actual chemical composition, what are the technical specs of the goods that are in transit. If these goods are being shipped, in which hold of which ships have these goods being shipped, and in what quantity. And finally, we can also look at stuff like the carbon footprint. So I know that for each and every step, so extraction, transportation, loading, shipping, discharging, and so on, for each and every step in the supply chain of these goods, there is going to be a certain amount of carbon dioxide being emitted, so we're able to track that and provide a green passport, if you will, for these goods. So basically, through unique identification, we're able to use identifiers such as QR code or RFID tags, for example, to provide a fingerprint to each and every unit of cargo or commodities we are trading and shipping. And with this, scanning these identifiers, we're able to then allow stakeholders to have an oversight on the information on the commodity origin, processing, movement, and ensure traceability and authenticity throughout the chain of custody. So this is true for cargoes which are hard cargoes, dry cargoes. For liquid cargoes, like imagine fuel, for example, I think it's a bit more complicated, but still not insurmountable, because for liquid fuels or liquid cargoes in general, what can be done is injection of molecular tracers within the cargo at specific quantities, which are usually in the parts per million. These tend to be inert chemical compounds, but very well defined in terms of their molecular composition. And so at any point in time, it is possible to take a sample of the cargo or the commodity being shipped. And this allows us to basically provide irrefutable verification of the product's origin, as well as preventing adulteration and providing in general security. And this is particularly important because if you're shipping stuff like fuels, for example, fuels are very much prone to being tampered with. So you might have fuel that goes in your car. We need to make sure that it's not being that is coming from reliable sources, that is coming with a specific chemical composition that will not damage the engine of your car, but also it's not coming from sanctioned countries. And because there is a lot of opacity in the whole supply chain, it is possible that at some point during transit, the perfectly legit fuel coming from Texas has been blended with Russian oil or Iranian oil, and at some point then it becomes a sanction compliance question. And so by using these molecular markers, we're able to identify each and every batch and provide additional security throughout the chain. So basically, the benefits of doing this is essentially the transparency, allowing all parties to track the commodity journey step by step, security, so protection against adulterated goods, as well as accountability, because each and every action in the chain will be recorded and verified independently. So how do we do that? How can we verify that at every stage? Well, beyond location, blockchain also allows us to store additional information like data. And so, for example, whenever there is a transaction recorded onto a marketplace, let's say supplier A has sold a batch of rice in bags to supplier B, to customer B, there is usually an independent inspector that goes into the warehouse, takes a sample to a laboratory, and a laboratory can then provide a chemical analysis of what is being bought and sold and then shipped, and all this information can then be recorded onto the blockchain to provide additional security and, let's say, rubber stamp the quality of what is being purchased. This is when it comes to, let's say, quality. We can also look at what we talked about before, which is sustainability and in general the carbon footprint. So again, if we introduce blockchain, we know at each and every stage what is the sheer amount of emissions that goes into the transiting and in general the journey of these commodities. And this can be particularly important if we look at decarbonization in general. And I'm going to take a step back here to talk about decarbonization in the world of shipping, for example. We are looking to within the shipping industry, we're looking at transitioning from fossil fuels to more, let's say, environmentally friendly and sustainable fuels. That could be hydrogen or ammonia, for example. Now, if we take hydrogen, you can produce hydrogen by either burning coal, and so you have out of the funnel, you're going to be burning, in a ship you'll be burning hydrogen, and so you have zero emissions at the funnel. But if you have produced that hydrogen by burning coal, you might as well burn the coal on board the ship. It would have been way more environmentally friendly. On the other hand, if you produce hydrogen by using wind energy, for example, or solar energy, then you have what is called a green hydrogen, as opposed to grey hydrogen, which is obtained by using fossil sources. So throughout each and every step, we're able to see what method has been used, what sort of a source of primary energy has been used to produce the fuel, and we're able to track it all the way from production to storage and finally consumption. And we're able to essentially provide a green passport and provide the carbon intensity per kilogram of fuel of what has been produced, or what has been sold if we're talking about what has been traded onto our marketplace. So again, there are many different applications in various respects to this. Another very important aspect is enabling seamless transactions. As you were saying earlier on, there's always a challenge with traditional payments. There's always a challenge of the chicken and egg. So if I am a supplier, I usually don't want to ship out my goods if I've not received a payment. And if you're buying them from me, I don't really know you, and not feeling really comfortable in sending out my stuff to you if I've not received payment. And equally, you're going to be a little bit skeptical as to pay me if you don't know who I am as a supplier and if you've not received the goods first. And so what do we do? What comes first? So as of today, cross-border transactions tend to be fairly complex, and they involve usually banks as intermediaries that provide letter of credit, which means that banks release payments as soon as certain conditions are met, i.e. A surveyor has identified a cargo ready to be shipped, the cargo has been placed on board the vessel, chemical analysis has been performed, and it agrees with what the specs of the goods should look like, at which point the bank releases a payment. This tends to be a fairly costly exercise. So what we do with blockchain, and what we're planning to do with blockchain, is essentially streamlining this by leveraging blockchain to facilitate direct and secure payments, initiation between buyers and sellers, and also activating these through smart contracts. So whenever certain conditions are met, then without relying on banking intermediaries, we're able to process a payment directly through the blockchain. So let's have a quick look at an example. So let's take the iron ore again. I know that the iron ore must have specific chemical characteristics for me to be able to burn it into my steel mill. And so the first step will be product has been verified, the product went from the mine to the port and is ready to be loaded. Great. At this point, the smart contract knows that once the product is being loaded on the ship, my ship has arrived and is going on board the ship, then my bank can connect directly to the seller's bank and release the first payment. Then once the whole cargo has been placed on board the ship and then has been discharged on my port of delivery, then the bank will finally issue the final payment. So all this can be done either through traditional means, to traditional banking, by skipping the letter of credit step, or completely on the blockchain through crypto as well. So the advantages of doing this is essentially the speed, so faster transaction times executed automatically, security, and then efficiency, as we said, reduced cost by eliminating letters of credit, which can usually be as high as 10 to 12% of the value of the goods that are being purchased. So basically this is what we do as BLK. We are at the unanalyzed spot market. As of today, we are the first horizontal commodity marketplace. There are some, obviously there are some competitors out there. Alibaba is one of them. However, Alibaba is very much of a marketplace where you can buy a mobile phone, a high dryer, or 50,000 tons of coal. We are very much focused on raw materials and commodities across the board. As of today, we host over 8.2 billion US dollars worth of goods for sale on our marketplace, and this continues to grow. Our vision is essentially to create the online spot market, so a peer-to-peer marketplace where no matter the size of your business, you can be seen, connect, and compete, and essentially facilitating businesses worldwide. So where do we operate? This is a bit of a pyramid that illustrates international trade and what the market looks like. So at the bottom of the pyramid, you have the usual suspects. You have retail. Retail has been partly digitalized already by the players such as Amazon, eBay, Walmart, AliExpress. It's a massive, massive market, and it's partly already online, and we're all very comfortable in buying online. The market that we really focus on is the tip of the pyramid, the upstream supply chain, which is worth about $4.5 trillion, and the wholesale with fulfillment in between. So you extract raw material from the mine, and then you ship it over to a wholesaler. So the whole two bits of the pyramid at the top are where we focus on. And this tends to be very much offline at the moment. There are very few players that tend to be active in vertical specifics, so metals only or agricultural commodities only. So we bring about this horizontal marketplace and digitalization that we are bringing to the world. So on top of that, we offer direct physical fulfillment. So we have our own fleet of vessels, similarly to the Amazon example. Amazon has vans, we have ships, we move large quantities of raw materials, we have automated embossing and order management, as well as our proprietary vetting system that we use to make sure that of the quality, cost, and service delivery provided by all of the users in our marketplace. And finally, we introduce standardized terms and conditions for sale, purchase, as well as shipment contracts. And so what we are providing is a very much of a Web 2, let's say, setup as of today. We have received £50 million investment from Nimbus Capital from across the pond, and we'll be taking the company public this year, further to which we'll be developing further the blockchain, let's say, setup that I've illustrated today. So it was fairly quick. I have just a few minutes to take any questions, and then I'm going to have to rush off because I have a meeting that I need to take. So thanks very much for your attention. Very briefly, 23.5, the question I asked before, is the size of the market. So it's $23.5 trillion, which is the value of total value of the market, upstream supply chain and wholesale. So thanks again for listening today.